So let's get right into it. Vince McMahon plotting a return to WWE, per the Wall Street Business Journal. And like we talked about a couple of weeks ago here on the show, when the news first broke about a month ago that Vince wanted back into WWE, which wasn't overly surprising at the time, neither is this news that came out today. This is the same outlet that broke the news about Vince and the allegations surrounding Vince last summer. So that whole article from the Wall Street Business Journal last summer was what led to Vince McMahon leaving WWE. Now, he still owns a lot of the stock, shares, whatever, on the business end of things. He's still involved in a certain capacity. Beyond that, though, he's not the chairman. He's not in control of creative or anything. He has no real influence in WWE right now as far as the day-to-day operations go. He's still tied to the company due to how much stock and shares and stuff like that he owns. But beyond that, he has no real say in what WWE does, has done in the last 6 months, but he could going forward. So the article came out today, as I'm speaking, on Thursday, January 5th. The latest article from the Wall Street Journal, and props to WrestleZone for the transcription here and kind of summing up the article, that Vince McMahon is attempting to return to WWE this year in order to sell the company. Now, this came from Lauren Thomas of the Wall Street Journal, and they talked about in the article basically that Vince wants to come back to the company in order to sell WWE in 2023. And the article went so far as to say that if he's not brought back, then he will not support or approve, in their words in this article, any media rights deal or sale. And this is imperative because coming up in 2023 via, 2024 really, but it all happens this year, is when the negotiations begin. Does WWE stay with NBC Universal? Does SmackDown stay on Fox? They split the two deals. Did they all go back to NBC? Does SmackDown go back to NBC Universal and USA and whatever? It's a very crucial year for WWE, and the Vince stuff going down when it did last year perfectly set up WWE to have that shit behind them, improve the product, and put themselves in a better spot to, get more money, get the same amount of money, and they made a lot of money off those last TV right deals 5 years ago. And with the, renewals coming up very soon, this shit coming out right now is fucking terrible timing. And we all kind of thought there might be a chance that Vince might raise hell and trying to prevent the company from basically moving forward without him. But you don't really expect that. I mean, he is an egomaniac, so we probably should have expected this, especially everything coming out about Vince in the last year, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. So we probably should have expected this. You don't want to believe it, though, until you read shit like this. And like I said earlier at the start of the show, this is not like Wrestling Observer newsletter, hearsay, rumors. Vince McMahon himself put out a fucking press release after this article came out on Thursday, confirming the news himself. Basically saying that he wants back into WWE, electing himself to be, I guess, I don't know, involved as the head of the company, whatever, and including George Barrios, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, and Michelle Wilson as directors, electing them as the directors of the company. Now, if those names sound familiar, it's because they were previously in those roles 3 years ago. And from what I understand, without knowing too much about WWE on the business side of things, they were very instrumental in the rise of the WWE network in the last 8-10 years, among many other things that WWE has done in furthering that line of, media and putting themselves in a better position and really boosting the stock to where it was before they left. They were very instrumental and a very positive force as far as that sort of stuff goes. And they were let go. Nothing really else came out about that at the time because COVID happened and our focus kind of shifted from that. But they were already gone from WWE. And it wasn't great news at the time. Doesn't sound like here's the thing. I've heard this a lot as far as Vince didn't want this person to go. And he was upset this person got released or left or whatever. And the narrative is that he couldn't do anything about it. I go back to the William Regal news. I go back to Gallows and Anderson, to where I think Gallows and Anderson, when they were let go, 3 years ago, they were upset at Paul Heyman. That was the whole thing at the time. They were upset at Paul Heyman for really playing a big role in them getting released. But apparently, I guess they kind of didn't give as much blame to Vince, even though Vince is the one that makes all the fucking decisions. Even if it was someone on the lower level of things, like a John Laurinaitis or a Heyman or whoever, Vince didn't stop them from getting released. Same thing with William Regal. William Regal, if he's on good terms with Regal and they like each other as people and whatever, and Regal kind of implied in that interview he did with Inside the Ropes a couple of months ago that it wasn't Vince's call to let Regal go. It was someone else's call who's no longer there, presumably John Laurinaitis, if not someone else. Vince signs all the checks, though. He was the go-to guy for everything in WWE. Even if he's not telling Laurinaitis or whoever, hey, get rid of Regal, he's still the one that can veto that decision. I mean, the guy has had so much fucking power at the time. If he didn't want to let Regal or anyone else go, he didn't fucking have to. So I don't buy that shit for a second. Same thing with Barrios and Wilson. They left on their own terms, which I don't think was the case. I think they were let go, per Vince, and now he's recruiting them to come back to help with the stock, not the stock, but the TV rights negotiation deals and shit like that. Give me a fucking break. So the most troubling part of all of this in the article, there's a couple of quotes from Vince himself talking about Barrios and Wilson and whatever. This was the quote that really got me. I mean, this was just incredible. It's in the article in the Wall Street Journal, like I said. And he says, and I quote, WWE is entering a critical juncture in its history, with the upcoming media rights negotiations coinciding with increased industry-wide demand for quality content and live events, and with more companies seeking to own the intellectual property on their platforms, said Mr. McMahon. The only way for WWE to fully capitalize on this opportunity is for me to return as executive chairman and support the management team in the negotiations for our media rights, and to combine that with a review of strategic alternatives. My return will allow WWE, I can't even get this through this, reading this without laughing, but he says, my return will allow WWE, as well as any transaction counterparties, to engage in these processes, knowing they will have the support of the controlling shareholder. So basically what he's saying is that WWE can't sell without him, and if they do, it's his decision. And basically what he is saying is that WWE cannot thrive, even survive without him. Even though that's exactly what they've fucking done for the last 6 months. Here's my thing. WWE has proven in the last 6 months since Vince stepped down, retired, whatever word you want to throw out, he was basically forced out because they realized it was a bad look to have this guy and it wasn't just what he did, which was disgusting, and all the allegations and just being a sex pest in general. The fact that he was having these women sign a lot of NDAs, not even the fact that he did or didn't use company money, which was also a big problem. But you can't have someone like that in charge of a company. For over the course of 20 years, this shit was happening and was swept under the rug. It's not a good look. Not, in addition to the fact the company, creatively hasn't really thrived in a very long time. Shareholders don't really give a shit about that sort of stuff. As long as the company's making money, they don't give a fuck. But the fact of the matter is this. There was all this talk among certain people at the time. I'm not talking like fans or like media people. There were rumors from officials at the top that were close to Vince, of course, and even people close to Vince per Fightful Select said a couple of weeks ago, we don't want Vince back. I have not read a single fucking report from any of these websites, from anyone that works there, from anyone that works behind the scenes, anyone that used to work there, saying that Vince would be welcomed back with open arms behind the scenes. I know I'm going off track here, but what I was trying to say was, before I went off track, was the fact that WWE has shown in the last 6 months without Vince that they are perfectly fine without him. He wants to send the narrative, and again, he tried to stir the pot when he first left, that they can't survive without Vince McMahon at the helm, which is complete and utter bullshit when you consider that's exactly what has happened in the last 6 months without Vince. They have survived, they have thrived. Ratings for SmackDown specifically have gone up. Stock has either remained the same, if not gone up. There has been WWE will never be perfect. Their decisions they make and business-wise, there will always be things they need to work on. But it's not as if the company is in such drastically bad shape that they need to go crawling back to a fucking 77, I think, year old man and Vince McMahon to fix their woes. He's the answer to all their issues, which is the farthest thing from the truth. Speaking solely as a fan from the creative standpoint, the product has absolutely improved on all fronts without Vince involved and Triple H in that spot instead. Is Raw infinitely better without Vince? Not infinitely, it was originally. The show has improved, though. You can't tell me the show is as bad now, if not worse, than from when Vince was in charge 6 months ago. That's just not true. SmackDown's a much better show. They made a lot of positive changes, bringing people back, giving them second chances. rehiring William Regal, people like that. Not every hire is going to be a winner, but by and large, Triple H is making the decisions that are best for the future of the WWE. Vince is not. He is simply serving his own ego. I mean, I think you could fucking... It's obvious. I mean, you just look at anything, and it's pretty obvious what is going on here. He knows that WWE is doing perfectly fine without him, and that eats him up inside. He knows that come the next TV rights deal, negotiations, whatever, that he's not involved in, and if WWE gets as good of a deal, if not a better deal, which they're bound to, with NBC or Fox or another third party, or they sell to someone else, like a Disney or an NBC most likely, or a Fox or whatever, and they make a lot of money off that, it's seen as a big positive change. Vince will not have been involved in that, and he can't take credit for it. That's going to bother him. And all this bullshit that they included in the article, or that he said himself, I don't intend to change anything on the management team, I will let them do as they've already done, all this fucking crap. I mean, nothing that we have seen from Vince would lead us to believe that he's telling the truth. Who's to say that Vince comes back and then doesn't let go of all the people he let go a year ago? If WWE had budget cut issues a year ago, and they had to let go of all of that talent then, and nothing, again, has drastically changed with the amount of money that WWE is making. I mean, COVID was the thing 3 years ago. It still is, obviously, but even then, 3 years ago, did they have to let go as much talent as they did? No, they could afford to pay all of their talent. All the other companies, for the most part, did. AEW, for the most part, did not let anyone go. Different company, I understand. They didn't have to let a lot of those people go. Some of those people didn't really make much of a difference anyway if they let them go or kept them or whatever. I get that. But they were still letting people go throughout 2021 and even early on in 2022. You can't say those were budget cut issues. That was simply a case of WWE, or specifically Vince, wanting to get rid of people because he woke up one day and thought they were no use to him. Even though the day before he was super high on him. The guy is as inconsistent as the fucking weather. I mean, it's incredible how this man works. And again, it really shouldn't be surprising to read something like that and think that he wants back in. And we were all kind of like joking about it a couple of weeks ago, thinking that would be, awful. And it is. Not thinking that there's anything that can really be done to make that happen. I honestly, sitting here right now without really reading very too much into it, it's only been a couple of hours since the news broke, since the article came out and whatever, without really looking into what other people have to say that have more information on the matter than I do, I don't know how realistic this is. If I had to take a guess, will Vince McMahon be back in WWE in 2023? I would have to say probably not. Could he be? Yeah, absolutely there's a chance. But I feel like the board of directors would be beyond dumb to think that bringing back Vince would be a positive move for them. And as other people have said, Sean Ross Sapp, among other people, I agree. I honestly think bringing back Vince, which would be a bad decision all around anyway, would probably more so hurt their chances of getting as good, if not a better TV deal with NBC or Fox or whatever, than it would help them. And that, to me, I feel like, again, that's merely a belief. That's not a fact. But I can't imagine bringing back someone as problematic as Vince McMahon and all the shit that's come out in the last year, in addition to WWE proving they can survive on their own without him, and putting a 77-year-old man back in charge, is anywhere near a good move. So all we can do is hope. I mean, this obviously isn't just talk. Vince literally put out a fucking press release indicating that he wants back in. And the whole thing is just weird. Reading this, paragraph after the one I read earlier about his quote, right after that it says, prior to delivering written consent, Mr. McMahon sent 2 separate letters. It's like this guy's like a jilted ex-fucking boyfriend or something. It's hysterical. Mr. McMahon sent 2 separate letters to the board in late December, in which he expressed the urgency of his return to the company as executive chairman and his desire to work collaboratively with the board and management team. I could just see Triple H on his phone, seeing Vince pop up on the fucking caller ID and him just pressing decline. I mean, it's hysterical how this whole thing is folded. I mean, the fact they would even put that in the article, I mean, I assume that's the press release and not the article that came out from the Wall Street Business Journal. I think that's what they put out there. I think Vince put that information out there himself, which makes him look just awful. The fact that he wrote the board, "Do you need me back?" and they haven't exactly gone back to him, I guess. So it goes on to say, Following conversations with representatives of the company, both before and after Mr. McMahon's most recent letter on December 31st, Mr. McMahon determined, consistent with his rights as controlling shareholder, that the steps announced today are necessary to maximize value for all WWE shareholders. I mean, the man realized that in the 5 months, now 6, going on 6 months, that he was home doing fucking nothing, quote-unquote retired, people thinking that technically, did he actually ever leave? No, because he still owns a lot of share and stock and stuff like that, whatever. He's still very much involved on that front. But people thinking that he was still writing the show and still very much involved in the writing of Raw, take your tinfoil hats off. That's ridiculous to even speculate. Give me a break. Obviously, he's still very much involved in the company on a certain front. No one's denying that. You would have to be a moron to not realize that. But as far as being still the chairman, still calling the shots, you're telling me that he stepped down and he didn't actually step down and Triple H was in charge, but merely just to look like Triple H was in charge and Vince was the one that brought back Hit Row. He brought back William Regal. Again, give me a fucking break. But he must have realized in the 5 months that he was gone from WWE, he has no life without it. He refuses to have a life without WWE. He can't go out and golf. He can't go out and take up a hobby. He can't take a fucking vacation. The man can't sleep for 4 consistent hours without thinking about WWE and what his next move is and where he goes from here and all this other sort of shit and making this decision and making that decision, a decision he'll probably go back on a day from now. He has no life outside of WWE. I said at the time, and I joked, I would love to see a documentary, not on the 9 lives of Vince McMahon, that was just a waste of time, a documentary on what Vince is doing now. Vince would never allow it. The man would show no vulnerability. But I would love to see what Vince has been doing in his free time, like just waking up every morning at 2 o'clock in the morning, opening up his computer, looking up news about himself and seeing how he can get back in, typing up a letter on Microsoft Word, sending it into WWE, them not getting back to him, trying to call Paul Levesque up, Triple H, hey, I think you should maybe cut Theory's name back to just Theory. Austin Theory can get confused. And then Triple H just hangs up. He's like, oh, no, I'm busy. Vince is like, no, listen, pal, I got a couple ideas. And then Triple H just hangs up. It's comical. We laugh. I laugh now, but it's not comical. It's just sad. It's just sad that Vince would want to bring the company down with him to service his own fucking ego. That's really all this is. At the end of the day, it's not about helping WWE. It's not about helping the management team. It's not about securing better TV rights for Raw and SmackDown and whatever. It's about bettering the future of Vince McMahon. Them using him to get better TV rights, first of all, they don't need him for that. They have enough people in place to figure that shit out. And listen, if they were to do that whole process and they fail and Raw and SmackDown end up worse off than they were previously as far as the TV rights are concerned, then, only then, maybe you can consider, which even then I wouldn't do this, but even then you can consider, hey, let's maybe consult Vince McMahon on the matter. To think he has to be involved just because he always has been and obviously wants to just because he wants control, and he can't muster the thought, he can't imagine a day like today where he doesn't have the control he once did. It bothers him. It eats him up inside. Well, listen, Vince, that's a you problem. Go the fuck away. Stay home. Catch up on a TV show. Watch The Sopranos. Enjoy life. We don't know how many days this guy has left. I would never, ever say this person should die or whatever. I thought the scenario with Vince was honestly best case scenario because we never thought Vince would ever go away as the head of WWE. It would take the man dying in gorilla for that to happen. But guess what? He didn't die. He didn't die. And he got to step down, not exactly with grace, with all the stuff that was surrounding him at the time, the controversies and the allegations. But listen, I would prefer that as for all that Vince has done for WWE and wrestling, making it what it is today, that doesn't mean he should still be in charge of the company. But at least him stepping down at all, whether he was forced out or not, which I absolutely believe, as opposed to him saying, you know what, I just want to retire, give me a fucking break. At least that was better than him dying at 77 or 80 or 85 or whatever. It's best case scenario. The guy gets to live, and he's not in charge of the company anymore. But unfortunately, the consequences of him still being around is that he won't let it rest. Vince McMahon will always be involved, attempt to be involved in WWE one way or another until the day that he dies, which hopefully will not come anytime soon. But it really comes off to me, as I said earlier, like a jilted ex-boyfriend situation. He can't stand to see his ex-girlfriend, wife, which I guess would now be Linda, even though they're not technically divorced in that whole messy situation. He can't stand to see the company doing just as well, if not far better, which it is, without him in charge. Because he's been so involved for so long, he thought that he is WWE. It's not about WWE, it's about Vince McMahon being WWE. And they are better off without him. He's using this TV rights bullshit as an excuse to get back in charge of the company. And I sure as fuck hope it doesn't happen. WWE would absolutely be worse off with Vince back in any sort of capacity. And based off all the reports I saw from all these different outlets and whatnot, indicating that everyone in the company, maybe not everyone, but a majority of the company, talent, people working behind the scenes, even higher ups, even people close to Vince when this whole thing happened last year, don't want him back. That should tell you all you need to know about what's going on here.